a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Operation Entebbe. Operation Entebbe, or Operation Thunderbolt, was a successful counter-terrorist hostage rescue mission carried out by commandos of the Israel Defense Forces at Entebbe Airport in Uganda on the 4th of July 1976. It has been referred to as the most daring and audacious rescue mission in history. A week earlier, on the 27th of June, an Air France plane with 248 passengers had been hijacked by two members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine External Operations under orders of Wadi Haddad, and two members of the German Revolutionary Cells. The hijackers had the stated objective to free 40 Palestinian and affiliated militants imprisoned in Israel and 13 prisoners in 4 other countries in exchange for the hostages. The flight, which had originated in Tel Aviv with the destination of Paris, was diverted after a stopover in Athens via Benghazi to Entebbe, the main airport of Uganda. The Ugandan government supported the hijackers, and dictator Idi Amin personally welcomed them. Amin had been informed of the hijacking from the beginning. After moving all hostages from the aircraft to a disused airport building, the hijackers separated all Israelis and several non-Israeli Jews from the larger group and forced them into a separate room. Over the following 2 days, 148 non-Israeli hostages were released and flown out to Paris. 94, mainly Israeli, passengers along with the 12-member Air France crew, remained as hostages and were threatened with death. The IDF acted on information provided by the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad. The hijackers threatened to kill the hostages if their prisoner release demands were not met. This threat led to the planning of the rescue operation. These plans included preparation for armed resistance from Ugandan troops. The operation took place at night. Israeli transport planes carried 100 commandos over 2,500 miles to Uganda for the rescue operation. The operation, which took a week of planning, lasted 90 minutes. Of the remaining hostages, 102 were rescued. 5 Israeli commandos were wounded and 1 unit commander Lieutenant Colonel Yonatan Netanyahu was killed. All the hijackers, 3 hostages, and 45 Ugandan soldiers were killed, and 30 Soviet-built MiG-17s and MiG-21s of Uganda's Air Force were destroyed. 1 hostage was left behind in a hospital and later killed. Kenyan sources supported Israel, and in the aftermath of the operation, Idi Amin issued orders to retaliate and slaughter several hundred Kenyans then present in Uganda. There were 245 Kenyans in Uganda killed and 3,000 fled. Operation Entebbe, which had the military codename Operation Thunderbolt, is sometimes referred to retroactively as Operation Jonathan in memory of the unit's leader, Yonatan Netanyahu. He was the older brother of Benjamin Netanyahu, the current Prime Minister of Israel. Hijacking. On the 27th of June 1976, Air France Flight 139, an Airbus A300B-4-203, registration, departed from Tel Aviv, Israel, carrying 246 mainly Jewish and Israeli passengers and a crew of 12. The plane flew to Athens, Greece, where it picked up an additional 58 passengers, including 4 hijackers. It departed for Paris at 12:30 p.m. Just after takeoff, the flight was hijacked by 2 Palestinians from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine External Operations, and by 2 Germans, Wilfried Bose and Brigitte Kuhlmann, from the German Revolutionary Cells. The hijackers diverted the flight to Benghazi, Libya. There it was held on the ground for 7 hours for refueling. During the time the hijackers released British-born Israeli citizen Patricia Martel, who pretended to have a miscarriage. The plane left Benghazi, and at 3:15 p.m. on the 28th, more than 24 hours after the flight's original departure, it arrived at Entebbe Airport in Uganda. Hostage situation at Entebbe Airport. At Entebbe, the 4 hijackers were joined by at least 4 others, supported by the forces of Uganda's President, Idi Amin. The hijackers transferred the passengers to the transit hall of the disused former airport terminal, where they kept them under guard for the following days. Amin came to visit the hostages almost on a daily basis, updating them on developments and promising to use his efforts to have them freed through negotiations. On the 28th of June, a PFLP-EO hijacker issued a declaration and formulated their demands, in addition to a ransom of $5 million USD for the release of the airplane. They demanded the release of 53 Palestinian and pro-Palestinian militants, 40 of whom were prisoners in Israel. They threatened that if these demands were not met, they would begin to kill hostages on the 1st of July 1976. Separation of the hostages into two groups. On the 29th of June, after Ugandan soldiers had opened an entrance to a room next to the crowded waiting hall by destroying a separating wall, the hijackers separated the Israelis from the other hostages and told them to move to the adjoining room. As they did so, a Holocaust survivor showed hijacker Wilfred Bose a camp registration number tattooed on his arm. Bose protested, "I'm no Nazi, I am an idealist." In addition, 5 non-Israeli hostages, 2 ultra-Orthodox Jewish couples from the US and Belgium, and a French resident of Israel, were forced to join the Israeli group. According to Monique Epstein-Karlepsky, the French hostage among the 5, the captors had singled them out for questioning and suspected them of hiding their Israeli identities. On the other hand, according to French hostage Michel Kogge-Goldberg, the captors failed to identify at least one Israeli among the passengers who was a military officer with dual citizenship, then using his non-Israeli passport, and he was later freed as part of the second release of non-Israeli hostages, U.S. citizen Janet Almog, Frenchwoman Jocelyn Monnier and French-Israeli dual citizen Jean-Jacques Maimoni, whose name had not been called up during the reading of the original passport-based list, reportedly joined the Israeli hostage group by their own choice. Release of most non-Israeli hostages. On the 30th of June, the hijackers released 48 hostages picked from among the non-Israeli group, mainly elderly and sick passengers and mothers with children. 47 of them were flown to Paris, and 1 passenger was treated in hospital for a day. On the 1st of July, after the Israeli government had conveyed its agreement to negotiations, the hostage-takers extended their deadline to noon on the 4th of July and released another group of 100 non-Israeli captives who again were flown to Paris a few hours later. Among the 106 hostages staying behind with their captors at Entebbe airport were the 12 members of the Air France crew, about 10 young French passengers, and the Israeli group of some 84 people. Operational planning. In the week before the raid, Israel tried using political avenues to obtain the release of the hostages. Many sources indicate that the Israeli cabinet was prepared to release Palestinian prisoners if a military solution seemed unlikely to succeed. A retired IDF officer, Baruch Bar-Lev, had known Idi Amin for many years and was considered to have a strong personal relationship with him. At the request of the cabinet, he spoke with Amin on the phone many times, trying to gain the release of the hostages, without success. The Israeli government also approached the United States government to deliver a message to Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, asking him to request Amin to release the hostages. Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Defense Minister Shimon Peres spent 1 week disagreeing on whether to give in to the terrorists' demands or not, to prevent more terrorism. At the 1st of July deadline, the Israeli cabinet offered to negotiate with the hijackers to extend the deadline to the 4th of July. Amin also asked them to extend the deadline until that date. This meant he could take a diplomatic trip to Port Louis, Mauritius, to officially hand over chairmanship of the Organization of African Unity to Siwuze Garamjulam. This extension of the hostage deadline proved crucial to providing Israeli forces enough time to get to Entebbe. On the 3rd of July, at 18:30, the Israeli cabinet approved a rescue mission, presented by Major General Yakutil Kuti Adam and Brigadier General Den Shimron. Shimron was appointed as the operation commander. Attempts at a diplomatic solution. As the crisis unfolded, attempts were made to negotiate the release of the hostages. According to declassified diplomatic documents, the Egyptian government under Sadat tried to negotiate with both the PLO and the Ugandan government. PLO chairman Yasser Arafat sent his political aide Haniyeh Hassan to Uganda as a special envoy to negotiate with the hostage-takers and with Amin. However, the PFLP-EO hijackers refused to see him. Raid preparation. When Israeli authorities failed to negotiate a political solution, they decided that their only option was an attack to rescue the hostages. Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Shani, lead pilot of the operation, later said that the Israelis had initially conceived of a rescue plan that involved dropping naval commandos into Lake Victoria. The commandos would have ridden rubber boats to the airport located on the edge of the lake. They planned to kill the hijackers, and after freeing the hostages, they would ask Amin for passage home. The Israelis abandoned this plan, because they lacked the necessary time, and they also received word that Lake Victoria was infested with crocodiles. Amnon Biran, the mission's intelligence officer, later stated that the proper layout of the airport was unknown, also the exact location of the hostages and whether the building had been prepared with explosives. Aircraft refueling. While planning the raid, the Israeli forces had to plan how to refuel the Lockheed C-130 Hercules aircraft they intended to use while en route to Entebbe. The Israelis lacked the logistical capacity to aerially refuel 4 to 6 aircraft so far from Israeli airspace. While several East African nations, including the logistically preferred choice Kenya, were sympathetic, none wished to incur the wrath of Amin or the Palestinians by allowing the Israelis to land their aircraft within their borders. The raid could not proceed without assistance from at least one East African government. The Jewish owner of the Block Hotels chain in Kenya, along with other members of the Jewish and Israeli community in Nairobi, may have used their political and economic influence to help persuade Kenya's President Jomo Kenyatta to help Israel. The Israeli government secured permission from Kenya for the IDF task force to cross Kenyan airspace and refuel at what is today Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Kenyan Minister of Agriculture Bruce Mackenzie persuaded Kenyan President Kenyatta to permit Mossad to collect intelligence prior to the operation, and to allow the Israeli Air Force access to the Nairobi airport. In retaliation, Ugandan President Idi Amin ordered Ugandan agents to assassinate Mackenzie. He was killed on the 24th of May 1978 when a bomb attached to his aircraft exploded. Later, Mossad Chief Director May Emmett had a forest planted in Israel in Mackenzie's name. Hostage intelligence. The Mossad built an accurate picture of the whereabouts of the hostages, the number of hijackers, and the involvement of Ugandan troops from the released hostages in Paris. Additionally, Israeli firms were involved in building projects in Africa during the 1960s and 1970s, and while preparing the raid the Israeli army consulted with Solbone, a large Israeli construction company that had built the terminal where the hostages were held. While planning the military operation, the IDF erected a partial replica of the airport terminal, with the assistance of civilians who had helped build the original. Mookie Betts said in a later interview that Mossad operatives extensively interviewed the hostages who had been released. He said that a French Jewish passenger who had a military background and a phenomenal memory provided detailed information about the number of weapons carried by the hostage takers. After Betts collected intelligence and planned for several days, 4 Israeli Air Force C-130 Hercules transport aircraft secretly flew to Entebbe Airport at midnight without being detected by Entebbe Air Traffic Control. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?